on blackboard and then bring the doctor notes.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, but I asked Devan Santos. She told me like he's not
Oh,
online. Oh,
hello.
Hi, Professor.
Yeah, hi, Candice, and hi, Awa.
hi.
Uh, Hi, sorry about that. I forgot to turn on the collaborate all this time. I knew you guys were there, but somehow it just slipped my mind. So it's been going on already for almost 30 minutes, but you guys were left out. Um, so I'm sharing my screen, right? Okay. So all this time. Uh, okay. As I said, if the company is using, if the company has a project, and this project is, as I said, there can be three types of projects: either replacement or expansion or new venture. Right? Everyone remembers that there are three types of projects. You are replacing the worn out capacity of your capital. That's replacement project. Or expansion, right? You are expanding your production capacity, and to expand your production capacity, right? You're doubling your production capacity because your products are very well accommodated by the market. Um, and the third project, new venture, right? You're going into a completely different product line, new venture, right? So in all of those projects, you need capital, right? So how do you raise capital? Um, the cheapest source of capital is debt. Remember, cheapest source of capital is debt, and then preferred stock, and the most expensive source of capital is uh, common stock, right? You pay, in other words, you have to pay higher return. Um, so suppose you raised so this new project requires let's say new project requires $10 billion. If the new project requires $10 billion, what would you do? You think, I'm gonna raise $10 billion all by debt because it's the cheapest. No, no. You go by the capital structure, right? Remember, if the target capital structure is 30% debt, 10% preferred stock, 30, 10, and then 60% common stock, then you raise capital in this proportion, right? Make sense? So that's why we are doing this. Weighted average cost of capital, the weight of debt times cost of debt, plus weight of preferred stock times cost of preferred stock, plus weight of the common stock times cost of common stock, right? Cost of equity. Yes?
One question.
Yes.
Say you want to raise 10 million and you have 1.5 in retained earnings.
Yeah, so that's what, look, so first, out of this 10 billion, if we go by that, so new capital needed is 10 billion, and so 30% of that, that's 3 billion, you will raise 3 billion in debt, right? And then 10% preferred stock, you'll raise 1 billion in preferred stock, so 6 billion is left, right, to fill. And then you already have 1.5 billion in retained earnings. So you use 1.5 billion, and then that remaining lacking, then how much are you lacking? 4.5 billion, right? That will be raised by selling new shares, right? But then again, using retained earnings is not for free. You have to understand why. The retained earnings, this project must generate, in other words, if the cost of capital, is cost of equity is 10%. That means that's the required return on the equity. So from this project, if it doesn't generate at least 10%, right? It's better not to use retained earnings on the project, but rather you would put, let's say, if this project isn't going to return more than this required return, right? And it's better to put it into the market. And let's say there is a particular stock that pays, 15% return. It's better to, instead of pursuing this project, it's better to put that money into that stock. Isn't that right? The better for the shareholders. Isn't that right? It's better for the shareholders. But again, that's why using common stock, using the retained earnings is for free. It has to meet at least, right? The return from this project must at least clear that cost of equity, right? Makes sense? So that's the concept of, now how do you calculate that cost of equity? There are three ways. We talked about this last time. This is Gordon growth model using Gordon model, right? Gordon growth model. But other models are, we use CAPM or risk premium. Okay, I don't want to go over this all over again. It's like reteaching everything. I mean, the whole 2 weeks that we had done before the spring break, you are responsible for remembering, right? And I cannot just, to bring back everything. I have to reteach everything, and there's no way I can do that. We have very limited time, and we still have other topics. So that's why you have to study constantly on your own. Now, so here, if that was, that was in case we are using retained earnings, and in case we are using, we are selling new stocks, new common stocks, right? We need to make adjustment, right, to that formula for that flotation cost, right? Previously, the formula was, Gordon model, right? And I showed you, basically, Gordon model is finding price of the stock, right, based on dividend at time 1 and R minus G. But here, in other words, this is the cost of equity. If you solve this equation for cost of equity, R, then it turns into this, right? And then we make just, adjustment for flotation cost there. Okay, so here's the that example. Suppose Periwinkle had to raise capital beyond that available from retained earnings, what would be the cost of equity from new stock if flotation costs were 12%? Now, using this, equation 13.9, which is, this, and from the scenario previously, look at the, let's go back to the scenario there, periodical. So it paid a dividend of $1.65. So this is dividend at time 0. Currently, stock price is this, P0, right? Growth rate, 7.5. This was all given. So all we need to do is plug in those numbers. So D0 was $1.65, wasn't it? Yeah. $1.65. My handwriting. And the growth rate was 7.5%, wasn't it? Right. So 0.075, also 0.075. Flotation cost was 33.6 was the price. And the flotation cost was 12%, wasn't it? So 0.12. So if you just plug in, we'll come to 13.5%, which is, of course, more expensive than this, right? Obviously, when you sell new stocks, cost of equity should be greater than using retained earnings, right? This will all come into, this will all, next example. This is the mother of all examples. So I don't know, I spent too much time on the, spent too much time to bring you up to the ramp. So I don't know if I can do this. So next topic is marginal cost of capital. What is marginal cost of capital? A firm's weighted average cost of capital is not independent of the amount of capital raised. Yeah, think about it. Just like the example I used before, if you had already, 1.5 billion in retained earnings, but you need to sell, if the project can be all accommodated by debt, preferred stock, and retained earnings, then there will be no jump in the weighted average cost of capital, right? But if the required capital needed is not met by the retained earnings, right, then we will have to sell new stocks. And then the cost of capital will jump. Weighted average cost of capital will jump, right? In other words, let me show you this picture. So the picture is like this. Up to, let's say, the total capital required, let's say, is 10 million. And then up to 5 million, they can do it by debt, preferred stock, and retained earnings, right? So the weighted average cost of capital, In other words, weight of this is weighted average cost of capital. So it's weight of debt times cost of debt plus weight of preferred stock times cost of preferred stock plus weight of equity times cost of equity. And this equity here is the retained earnings. Understand? But then up to that point, up to 5 million, they can use retained earnings. So weighted average cost of capital is 9.2. But the capital needed is 10 million. Then beyond 5 million, weighted average cost of capital will have to jump to 10.4, because this is no longer, retained earning. This is no longer retained earnings only, right? Because you will need to sell new stocks, and selling new stocks will have higher cost of equity. So weighted average cost of capital will jump, right? So that's what marginal cost of capital is. So let's take a look at the example. There will be a break in the marginal cost of capital when retained earnings run out. Of course, what this was showing you was up to this, marginal cost of capital is still the same thing, 9.2, up to 5 million. But beyond 5 million, weighted average cost of capital will go up. And then from there on, marginal cost of capital is 10.4. And beyond that, let's say 15 million. Maybe from 50 million, it may go up. It may go up more, right? It can go up more, because the more equity you sell, the market can require higher return, right? Yeah. What was the question?
So if they sell the stock, right, but they're not able to still make that goal of 10.4, how would they get the extra money?
No, 10.4 is the required return. Mm-hmm. So the required return is, once again, the return is not what the company pays to the shareholders. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because they don't distribute the profit. They don't distribute EAT. If the shareholder wants to recoup that profit, then they will sell. And as they sell, if the company has been doing well, that profit is reflected in the stock price. So when they sell, they can recoup it, right? The point is, and the thing is, sometimes, if the company is doing well, they will meet this required return.
Right.
But if the company is doing well, they fail to meet this required return. And if they fail to meet the required return, they cannot sell stocks anymore. They can, because the market won't demand it. The demand will be very low in the market. If they fail to meet that target return, the demand will be very low. Isn't that right? Think about it. If Tesla, does anyone have any stocks? If you have stocks, you will know. If the company, you have Tesla?
Yeah,
okay. And the main reason that people buy Tesla is because Tesla has been doing very well over the last few years. And so the required return for Tesla, and the required return is not, again, it's determined by the CAPM. In other words, required return is not like determined by taking poll. You cannot survey every shareholder, right? There's no way. Minority shareholders, you don't know them. Company doesn't know who are the minority shareholders, right? Because minority shareholders are only the the brokerages would know the minority shareholder's name because the shareholders buy stocks through the brokerage firm. So the brokerage firms may know the minority shareholder's name. But it's not like Tesla would check with every brokerage firms to learn the names of the minority shareholders. So it's not like a survey. It's not the required return is not the result of a survey. They cannot do a survey, right? Required return is determined by CAPM, right? So think about it. If Tesla hasn't been doing well, so and that's why the price is still very high. So if you, by the end of this year, let's say if Tesla reaches like $1,500, if you bought it when it was 1,000, you already realize 50%. If you sell, you already realize 50% gain or 50% return. Make sense? And if Tesla's cost of equity, in other words, required return, was 30%, you beat even the required return. So people will still buy Tesla. The demand for Tesla will be so high. Right? Makes sense? So in other words, but if Tesla has been doing very poorly and it doesn't even meet that required return, once again, required return is calculated by CAPM, right? So if Tesla even made 30%, Tesla's return was, let's say 10%. And still, it's not a bad thing. It's still positive return, but it didn't meet the cost of equity. Some investors will feel disappointed and they will sell, right? They will sell. So if that's the case, then it's going to be difficult for Tesla to raise new capital by selling new stocks. Make sense? But this is all based on the assumption that they meet the cost of equity, and then they can sell new stocks. So that's what is meant by marginal cost of capital. So let's take a look at this example. So this is a very extensive example. The breaks in marginal cost of capital occur when cheap sources of financing are used up, right? First increase in MCC usually occurs when the firm runs out of retained earnings and starts raising external equity by selling new stock. Okay, so how do we locate where that break happens? The first break point is always found by dividing the amount of retained earnings projected to be available by the fractional proportion of equity in the capital structure. So in other words, it's simple. If X is the new capital required, right? New capital to be raised, and so X is the equity retained earnings to equity ratio. So what does that mean? If the new equity required is 5 million, and then if the retained earnings is only 2 million, right? This ratio is, of course, 2/5 or 40%, right? So 40%. So 40% will be the, okay. Weighted average cost of capital 0 is the weighted average cost of capital before the first break, and so let's go to the, let's contextualize it. So using the example. So the capital structure is 40%, 60% equity, 40% debt, 6% equity. Cost of debt is 8%. Cost of equity is 10% from retained earnings, but 12% from selling new stocks. So, but your retained earnings is 3 million. Total capital requirement is 10 million, right? So, oops. Here, so cost of debt, I mean weighted cost of debt is 3.2%, right? Weight of debt, cost of debt, and then this is equity. This is weight. You know what I'm saying? This is weight of equity times cost of equity, right? Using retained earnings. But if you sell new stocks, weight of debt times cost of debt, it's still the same, but this is weight of equity times cost of equity, selling new. Then weighted average cost of capital is 10.4, right? You see, this plus this 9.2, this plus this 10.4. So assume business plan. So retained earnings is expected to be 3 million. Retained earnings, we are expecting to have $3 million in retained earnings. The capital structure is 60% equity. So capital raised in proportion to capital structure is 3 million, right? Because it's 60% of the where X is new capital raised at 9.2%, was it 9.2% weighted average cost of capital? And the new capital using retained earnings and debt so since X is the new capital to be raised, but 60% of that is the retained earning of 3 million. So then what should be the X? If you solve for X, then 3 million divided by 0.6, it should be 5 million. So 5 million needs to be raised through retained earnings and debt. In other words, retained earnings is already 3 million, so debt to be raised would be only 2 million. So you see, that's why you remember when I showed you this picture, the break happens after 5 million. And why was that 5 million? Because by the capital structure, by this 40%, 60% capital structure, 60% is equity, right? And then think about it. That 60% is 3 million, right? That 60% is 3 million. 3 million, then that means, up to 5 million, the other 40% is debt, right? 40% is 2 million, 60% is 3 million. So up to 5 million, you can raise the capital, you can raise it up to 5 million, you can raise it with 9.2% weighted average cost of capital. Does that make sense? Without selling new stock, just using retained earnings and debt, right? You can raise up to 5 million, right? With 9.2% weighted average cost of capital, right? So it almost looks like, I know you all understand, this is weighted average cost of capital, and this 6%, so this is weight of equity times cost of equity, okay? And by capital structure, 60% of the capital to be raised, 60% of the capital raised is equity, and that 60% is 3 million, in other words, the retained earnings, 3 million. Then what should be the other 40%? It should be 2 million, right? So the total you can raise is 5 million, still using 9.2% weighted average cost of capital. But beyond that, you will have to sell new stocks. When you sell new stocks, the weighted average cost of capital is 10.4, right? So that's why there's a jump, right, or break in marginal cost of capital. Marginal cost of capital is basically weighted average cost of capital, but why is it called because up to that point, marginal means incremental. Up to 5 million, you need to raise $1 more, still cost of capital is, weighted average cost of capital is 9.2, right? Up to 5 million, as you raise $1 more, as you need $1 more to raise, right? Still, it would be done at the weighted average cost of capital of 9.2. But after that, you have to sell new stocks. And as you sell new stocks, then weighted average cost of capital will have to be higher, because beyond that, this is why, because of the flotation cost, right? You have higher cost of equity, and because of that, weighted average cost of capital becomes. And so after that break, it's going to be 10.4, and then just for every more dollar, every $1 more, for $1 more you raise, that's what is meant by marginal, right? It's going to be still, right? 10.4, 10.4, 10.4. Of course, this is not really, we're, okay. So we haven't got to the real example. This one, Baxter Metal Works. This will be, we don't have time for this today. We'll have to talk about this in the next class. Baxter Metal Works, all righty. It's this one, okay? We did this last time, right? We certainly did this last time. We did this last time, but this one, this is the mother of all examples, okay? So we're gonna do this next time, okay? And then when we do this, then you will have the a better picture, right? So that's it for today. I guess this is just about the right time to. Any questions so far? Any questions? Questions? All right. So I'm gonna this Wednesday we're gonna do this, and then you'll be able to do the quiz too. Okay. Don't forget about quiz 2. All righty, so the class is dismissed.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna, for the people that are in the Collaborate, I don't know, okay, there are 3 people. All right, you guys have any questions?
No, thank you, Professor.
Okay,
No
all
question.
righty.
Thank you, Professor.
All right, take care, everyone. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. All righty, then I will stop recording and sign out. I'll see you guys also on Wednesday.